Now, we're turning our attention to hurling, and whatever about there being no jeopardy in the football this weekend, there is tons and tons of jeopardy for particularly the Munster Hurling Championship. I'm delighted to say Seamus Hickey is with us to talk to us about this. Seamus, we did not expect to be in this situation where there are a sequence of events which aren't that ridiculous this weekend, which could see Limerick crashing out of the championship. We did not see this forthcoming at all.
I saw it coming insofar as it was going to be an exceptionally competitive Munster Championship, and I saw that Clare were second on the list for Limerick, and that could go either way. So I would have seen a potential scenario. I don't think it's definitely possible. I don't know if it's going to be likely that Limerick are going to be out of the championship by the end of the weekend, but the reason they're there is because Hip are playing really well. Cork came back and snatched a draw to save their Munster Championship lives in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Clare, gave a huge performance against Limerick and then met a really, really disappointing Waterford side. So outside of Waterford, I would say the four teams in Munster are playing, they're playing for their lives. And that's championship. That's brilliant for me. Like, that goes back to the times when you had no safety blanket. You were playing a Munster semi-final for the chance to stay alive, and you're going for it. There's nothing to hold back for, and to me that's perfect. I love the round robin because we get great matches and we get them more regularly. But the stakes this weekend remind me of what I feel championship's about.
Yeah, it's a bit mad in that the football championship has been designed so that all the good teams get through, and the Munster Hurling Championship has been designed so at least one good team every year gets kicked out by basically the end of May. It kind of feels like maybe some people learned some lessons from the Munster Hurling when they were drawing up the football, but I don't know, it's a bit harsh on one of those four good teams you've been talking about.
Yeah, but realistically then, when you're talking about the Leinster Championship and Munster Championship combined, you've 11 total teams in the race for Liam McCarthy, and then you bring in the Joe McDonagh champions, and that's 12. So we're dealing with the disadvantage of just not having enough top-tier hurling counties, I would say, for competitiveness across the board. You'd rechange this championship structure if you had 18 competitive tems. Even if they had like football, where you've got maybe 12 really high-end teams, in the top, Division 1, Division 2 in the National League, would say. But that's the reality we're dealing with in hurling, is that we have a traditionally, competitive and dog-eat-dog Munster Championship, and then with Galway grafted into the Leinster Championship, it becomes far more interesting. For me, the Dublin-Wexford game became incredibly meaningful, particularly in the last 5-10 minutes when Wexford were hunting for that score to stay alive. And Dublin then saw it out. So to me, it's two good championship structures. And in Munster, the consequences are pretty stark.
Why are Limerick playing a little bit less fluently this year than they have in previous seasons?
Good question. But if we flash back 12 months, right? So Limerick 12 months ago were off a horrendous league campaign. And there was this same existential questions about, is it too hard to sustain this, and are they on the decline? So flash forward then 12 months, the Limerick players were the ones that consciously wanted to go for the league this year. They were the ones who wanted to go for the trophy and to show what they were about. And they did that in emphatic circumstances. Their second half against Tipperary in the semi-final was, again, it was an exceptional performance. The final against Kilkenny, whereas I would say Kilkenny probably weren't primed, and because of the Ballyhale contingent and the depth that they went into the club championship, they probably weren't, I'd say, at full tilt. But Limerick again performed exceptionally well, and trying to sustain that, because the league and the championship are so close. They aim for a final, win a final, and then carry that momentum into another competition where it's actually the earlier rounds. I think that's a difficult thing to do. And I think they probably did pay for that against Waterford. The performance against Waterford was lackluster. It was loose. It was indisciplined at times. And then when it came to Clare, they actually played quite well. Like Seamus Fanning and Aaron Glenn are still very sharp. Tom Morrissey caused all sorts of trouble to Diarmuid Ryan in the half-forward line. Yes, we lost Keane. That was a huge loss, for me. But structurally, Declan Hannon's having a good year. There's a lot of good things happening. It's just that Clare fought for absolutely everything. They won, I would say, 80% of the turnovers around midfield, and Limerick had 15 wides and lost by 1 point. So that's how close these games are, and that's what the margins are when two very good teams play off against each other. And look at the two versions of the championship fair we got from Limerick and Clare last year. What was between the two teams last year? It was literally a puck of a ball. So for me, it's not panic stations, I don't think, for Limerick, but they don't have the fluency I would have seen. Even at times, but I'd say 2021 is their high watermark. Last year, it felt like a struggle all the year through, from the start of the championship to the end. It was just win at whatever cost and by whatever margin it was necessary just to get over the line. This year, they played well against Clare and lost to a team that was better on the day. And now they're going to come up against a Tipperary team who are hurling really well with a lot of cohesiveness, I would say. They're moving the ball really well from back to front. They look like they're coached well. They look like they're playing to a plan, and they're going to be hard to break down. But that same Tipperary team has conceded, 6 goals in 2 championship matches. So that's one for Seamus Flanagan and Aaron Gillane to sharpen their knives for.
Seamus, you get all these rumours abound of discontent in the Limerick camp, shock exits from the squad, completely unverified rumours, I should add.
Sorry, we verified that they were untrue. We did actually talk to the Limerick press office and okay, here, look, we're just doing this because that's we have to do it, and they were like, no, not true.
And on all this, Seamus, when rumours like this that aren't verified start coming out, I guess it's just a sign of a team that has been so successful that all of a sudden these things crop up from somewhere and people try to latch onto it.
Well, like I think of any high functioning team, and the only team I can compare them to are this current crop of Limerick players and this team and the management setup as well. Like the only teams I can compare them to are like the Dublin, 6 in a row football team, the Kilkenny 4 in a row hurling team, the really high functioning teams, the Uniteds of the 99, 2000 kind of era, like when Ferguson was in his pomp. We really just had a villain at the top that people want to see fall. And, the price of success is that you're there to be shot at. So I don't think you can't complain about these things. You just have to get on with it. For me, particularly, the interest in the players off the field heightens. I never had that same interest off the field for most of my career with Limerick. It was, and after 2018, when I stepped away, I really saw it, step up drastically. And unfortunately, that's part of the modern world. So particularly the online world, where you kind of have to be either ready for the scrutiny or you don't put yourself in the public arena. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one for players. They're under the microscope for pretty much every time they go out on a night out these days. So it's a strange one. And like you said, rumors. Then you've no control over that. You've zero control over unsubstantiated stories that sound good and that people want to be true but are not. So it's I think it's part of being at the top. I remember again the same kind of stories coming out of the Dublin camp. A lot of it centred around Diarmuid Connolly, a lot of it centred around the different personalities that people didn't understand but wanted to get at. The likes of, so Stephen Cluxton was a mysterious guy. People were basically trying to create stories that fit their view of him rather than actually understanding who the guy was. So, it sounds like that time.
Yeah, and it also the gossipy nature of Irish life and society. We do love a bit of gossip, and WhatsApp has also fed into the ability for some randomer says something in a pub and suddenly it gets everywhere. Just in terms of how the team are changing, or if they are changing from a tactical perspective, and how other teams are beginning to understand what it was that Connacht's philosophy was doing to them. It does feel like there's been a bit of a close, like for all of the difficulties that Davies had at Waterford, he still did manage some things which caused Limerick some issues, and then the next day out we saw Clare completely revitalised from their opening championship match, do something slightly different again, which is also natural part of that progression through a great team. Eventually Mayo got closer and closer and closer to Dublin without ever getting over the line against them. So do you expect a reaction or a response from Limerick that they'll change things up slightly?
See, I don't think they're going to change fundamentally what they do, because it is so bedded in and so ingrained. What I kind of push back again about what you were saying about teams are doing tactically. So if you actually look at the first 15 minutes of the Waterford game, before Waterford lost Tig to Borca, Limerick were basically, they could do what they wanted. When Waterford dared them to do short puck outs, they did them. And they went out to Sean Finn, they went out to Barry Nash, and they worked them through the lines very easily, because Waterford were pushing back. They were sitting off the half-back line to basically cut out the dangerous long ball to the half-forward line to Hegarty. So Limerick basically had their way for the first 15 minutes and scored at will. And even could have had more if Billy Nolan wasn't. Like, I thought Billy Nolan's performance against Limerick was superb in goals for Waterford. So they really did have their way. For me, as soon as Tig Borca went off, Limerick got an extra man. Limerick didn't have Tig as the sweeper to avoid, a talismanic character for Waterford off the team. I genuinely think they sat back, and I think they relaxed a bit. And I think Waterford realised that they had lost somebody of huge importance and had to fill in the energy and the leadership that he provides, and they raised their game. And I think the game completely changed, because everybody was expecting a rout after the first quarter. And I think Limerick then were actually taking short balls and hitting them long, and they were doing uncharacteristic things. I think they went out of character against Waterford. Against Clare, Clare's long puck out against Limerick was diabolical. It was useless. They lost 60% of their long puck outs against Limerick. What they were winning was turnovers. They were winning hooks and blocks and tackles and turnovers in the half-forward line and midfield particularly. Like, Dave Fitzgerald was huge for them. I thought Cathal Malone was brilliant around the middle. Ryan Taylor, for me, this year has been a revelation. I think he's really grown into and stepped into a really strong role for Clare. I think that tactically against Clare, Limerick weren't out-thought. I think they were outworked. And because a lot of the things that Clare were doing against Tipperary, they did against Limerick last year, and a lot of those things they did last year. So I think it came down to execution. So I think teams have tested Limerick tactically, trying to dare them to go short and work it out, and they've actually been very good at that when they've been disciplined. But a couple of times against Clare, they took a short ball to Dan Morrissey, and Dan Morrissey stood on his D and launched it, which to me is not the way. It's not the way it's coached anyway by Connacht. It's work the ball through the lines and then launch from your own half back line, your own 65, where the likelihood of hitting space and a more accurate ball into your full forward line, which is our dangerous line, that's the way Limerick want to play. But I would say when you as players, when you actually relax a bit and get outside of what you should be doing, then I think the consequences are then you don't look as fluent or as joined up as you should be, and I think that was the case.
Okay, obviously the emotional understanding of how that game against Waterford went then would suggest that when they're going to be up for the game, they're going to be okay, and nothing more alive than a full Thurles against Tipperary to make you feel alive in the Munster Hurling Championship, particularly when your crown might be on the line. So in a weird way, would it be better for them if it was increased jeopardy in the game in Thurles?
I think it's overly simplistic to say if they're up for it. They're playing good teams, but I think it is.
If they don't allow the complacency to seep in,
yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean.
So yeah, I agree with that. So if you're talking about trying to stay focused, then there's nothing focuses the mind like the potential of a do or die. But it also, for me, the Clare loss might not have been a bad thing to recalibrate, but also the 3-week break. They're really, really fortunate with the schedule. With the 3-week break since the Clare game before this Tipperary game, of all the teams that are there, I very few are better than Limerick than going away to a camp, refocusing and coming out of it rejuvenated. So it's for me, the timing is even better for them. And like you said, a full Thurles against a quality team that you cannot take for granted, that's a good thing. I think it's from a Limerick perspective, you'd expect a reaction in terms of performance, and I would hope as a Limerick person that that's enough come Sunday.
Could the Limerick bench prove fairly crucial, Seamus? Because you think back to the league game, and if memory serves me correctly, Tip stayed in the game for large swathes of it, but then Limerick kind of brought the troops off the bench, and slowly but surely they throttled Tipperary out of the game. And if you look at the lads who came off the bench against Clare the last day, Mike Casey, Hegarty, Mulcahy, Conor Boylan came on late as well. They have some serious strength and depth that could prove crucial at the weekend.
Yeah, so I think every team is building a strong 5 subs off the bench. I see it across the board now. I see it with Clare, with Jim Meehan and Rob Mounsey. I see it in Tipperary. I see it with the likes of Conor Stakelum came on the last day. I thought he was superb. And they've got 3 or 4 different guys that they're bringing in to really shore up the 15, because that's what the modern game requires. For me, for Limerick, I think their bench is strong, but then you're testing your bench when you've got the likes of Cian Lynch now struggling for fitness, and like Sean Finn for me, he's irreplaceable for what he is. He's an incredible player. He's just a joy to watch how he plays the cornerback position for me. But the reality is then, like, you've got Mike Casey coming in, and he's a top tier fullback as well. So, we're fortunate that we have the depth, and Richie English is still there, and another all-star cornerback. He's still there to come on. So we do have depth, particularly in defence. We've got incredible depth. But then when it comes up the field, when you lose the likes of Keane, when you lose the likes of even Garrod being off the last day, for me, I have great faith in Cathal O'Neill, but it's slightly below the pace and the standard that's required yet. He can grow into that. He's a very young guy. But yeah, so that bench is going to be important. But for me, for Tipperary and the league was a kind of a repeat of what I've seen previous years, is they need to be able to close out games. I think that's as much mental as it is physical, and even in terms of executing skills. Like even against Cork, just been unable to close out 5-6 point leads in late stages of games, and just for me, that's there's going to be questions there for me for that Tipperary team until they actually do it.
Yeah, until
they close out a team, until they stop Limerick in the second half, because unfortunately the last 3 years they've really fared poorly in the closing period against them.
Well, they're going to have a full-throated roaring them home if they do have a 5 or 6 point lead on Sunday. Great to have you with us. Thanks a million, Seamus. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
It's Seamus Hickey helping us preview the Limerick game specifically at the weekend. We'll talk more about the Clare Cork game later on in the week as well.